हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय चैनल टीसी लर्निंग। आज मैं वापस आपके लिए बीएड के नोट्स लेकर के आई हूँ। ये है हमारा सेकेंड सेम पेपर 3 के नोट्स। पेपर 3 दैट इज़ लर्निंग एंड टीचिंग। उसके जो यूनिट 2 है, यूनिट 2 इज़ द थ्योरेटिकल पर्सपेक्टिव्स ऑफ लर्निंग। तो मैं आज आपके लिए यूनिट 2 के पूरे नोट्स लेकर के आई हूँ। यूनिट 1 का नोट्स मैं आपको ऑलरेडी लास्ट वीक दे चुकी हूँ। आपके पास यूनिट 1 के नोट्स ऑलरेडी होंगे, ठीक है। So let us start with the unit 2, that is the theoretical perspectives of learning. First our topic is the classical conditioning theory of Pavlov. Okay, so let us start. Meaning of the Pavlov classical conditioning theory. This is learning from the behavioristic viewpoint. According to the viewpoint, learning is the formation of conditioned reflexes or acquisition of involuntary anticipatory adjustment or a habit formation so that behavior may becomes automatic. By anticipatory adjustment, he means organic behavior which is not complete but with a gap in the whole equilibrium pattern. For example, hunger functions of the stomach, etc., are the organic behavior with a gap and so incomplete. Okay, so you can take the notes from here and write it down. It becomes complete when the object of hunger is obtained. Importance of anticipatory adjustment is very great because firstly, it is the foundation of all voluntary behavior. Secondly, it is the active desire that sets the goal and makes the organism strive. And thirdly, it determines the mindset or organic pattern of readiness. Unless this organic pattern takes place within, no real learning can appear. If we can control this anticipatory adjustment, we can also control learning. This controlled learning is the conditioned learning. In this, the thing is to be learned is determined as the cue stimulus, and this is then followed by a satisfying stimulus. This combination is repeated again and again, and ultimately, the learning of the cue stimulus is established. This is the conditioned learning. Conditioned learning is also accompanied by a generalization of the experience. For example, a child whose fear is conditioned to a white rat also begins to fear a rabbit, cotton wool, a white fur coat, and other alike objects. When the same process is repeated again and again for a long time, after the conditioning has taken place, it produces adverse effect. The conditioned SR becomes extinguished. For example, repeated exposure of the rat may gradually reduce the fear after it has been conditioned. Conditioned learning actually means responding normally by a natural response to an unnatural situation or stimulus, when in actual fact the response is to be in the presence of the natural stimulus. We have watering of the mouth saying a gulab jamun, or a child feels watering of the mouth when he sees or smells food and not by hearing a bell. But it is the common experience that the ringing of the recess bell leads to the watering of the mouth. This learning of watering of the mouth on hearing the bell is conditioned learning. It is established when repeatedly the recess bell is followed by some refreshment meals or lunch during recess and bells and food are associated in quick session. Much of the learning is by conditioning fear, anger, and many such reactions are aroused by unnatural, irrelevant, and unusual stimuli. Okay, so you can write it down and make your notes. Now comes to the principle of Pavlov classical conditioning theory. The success of the theory depends upon the following principle. First is the time principle. It means that there should be a wide gap of time between the cue stimulus and the satisfying stimulus. The longer the interval between the two, the less effective the association. This is the principle of time, or we can say the time principle. Okay? Next is the principle of intensity. It means that the satisfying stimulus should be of great intensity, otherwise, it cannot produce the desirable organic behavior. Third is the principle of consistency. It means that the same process should be repeated in the same way without any change for several days. Next is the situational principle. It means that the situation or the surrounding in which the learning is to take place should be such as there may not be in it chances of distraction. Next is the principle of repetition. It means that the repetition is necessary for reinforcement and fixation of learned response. And the last one is the principle of inhibition. Inhibition should not be allowed, that is, there should not be allowed any factor or situation that inhibits learning. Pavlov's students often found that having set up a conditioned responses in a dog, they not exhibit it to Pavlov because his presence in the room inhibited it. Likewise, we see student teachers failing to deliver a very well planned and prepared lesson in the presence of his supervisor. So these are the principle. Okay. Next comes to the educational implications of the Pavlov classical conditioning theory. Many things of the school subjects are learned more adequately through this process. Reading, writing, spelling, or habits are learned more effectively through the process of conditioning. Direct method of teaching English is just a process of conditioning. We learn many things in a better way through this process, and that is perhaps the reason why language is more efficiently learned by living in the society in which it is spoken. Teaching through visual aids also implies the same principle. Discipline may also be caused through conditioning. Good sentiments, good habits, virtues, and ideals, etc., which are the components of discipline, are effectively learned through the process of conditioning, and they are learned surely in a society in which they are actually lived and manifested. Classroom procedures are often far removed from the natural procedure required for the process of conditioning. Language are not taught as they ought to be in connection with many vivid and widely different experiences. If the regulations, commands, and virtues are followed by the friendly behavior and the most sympathetic attitude of the teacher, he can bring about a complaint emotional tone in the class that no amount of punishment can accomplish, but uniformity of procedure is essential. Voluntary action may be controlled through reasoning, punishment, and reward, but if its involuntary basis is neglected, it will not endure. It in conditioning, involuntary responses are controlled through the cue stimuli. These are the educational implications. Okay, you can write it easily. Theory of reward and punishment is also based on conditioning. Children know that they will be punished as a result of wrong actions and they will be rewarded as a result of good deeds. Thus, for the conditioning of the child, it is essential to punish him for his misdeed and give him reward for distinctions. This thing motivates the children in the classroom. Our next point is the useful in language learning. The teacher can utilize this conditioning method in the classroom for teaching the languages. Conditioning is much useful in language training, particularly Sanskrit language. The correct use of the language makes the child conditioned for the use of that particular language. Apart from Sanskrit language, this conditioning method is quite effective to the learning of subjects like mathematics. Okay, so this is the second point that is useful in language learning. So all these are the points comes which comes under the educational implications. Okay, आई होप आपके लिए ये नोट्स हेल्पफुल हो. मैंने फर्स्ट यूनिट के भी वीडियो डाला है, तो आई होप कि वो आपके लिए काफ़ी हेल्पफुल हो, जो भी अभी सेकेंड सेम में जा रहे हैं, जो सेकेंड सेम में है एक्चुअली. और मैंने अपने प्रीवियस वीडियो में आपको ये भी बताया था कि आप क्लियर आउट कर लीजिएगा दैट वेदर यू आर हैविंग एग्जाम्स ऑफ द सेकेंड एंड थर्ड सेम और नॉट. ठीक है, बाकी तो फिर मैं हूँ ही. Let us see the third point, that is helpful in removal of superstitions. A teacher can make the use of conditioning method to eliminate the superstitions of the children. Certain superstitions like sneezing and passing the cat across your way, etc., can be removed by this method. The teacher has to develop faith in the children through conditioning that such type of superstitions have no place in real life situations. They have to be pulled out of his habit, of his false orbit. Okay. Next is the development of attitude. Conditioning may help the children in breaking negative and promoting attitude. In short, good and bad habits may be developed in the child through this method of conditioning. Proper habits can be formed by providing the educational of positive behavior and values to the child. Thus, a teacher should present himself or herself before the child as an idol. अब आप ही सोचो ना, रिमूवल ऑफ सुपरस्टिशंस में अगर इस पॉइंट पर हम लोग लेते हैं, टीचर खुद ही बोल रही हैं स्नीज कर रहे हो यू कांट गो आउट और समथिंग लाइक दैट, और सामने से कोई कैट पास हुआ तो वो बोल रही नहीं नहीं डोंट गो दैट साइड. तो इफ़ द टीचर विल डू दैट, टीचर विल शो दैट एटीट्यूड, एंड what about the students will obviously show. So it's development of the attitude towards of the teacher is very much useful. Okay, now comes to the helpful in adjustment. The conditioning method helps the child in adjusting in various types of environment. The beginning of this takes place with the adjustment of the child in classroom conditions and school circumstances. Later he applies all this to make adjustment in real life challenging situation. It is conditioning only that enables the child to make way in difficult and odd circumstances. Our next point is use of audio-visual aids. The use of audio-visual aids in the it's aids not ads aids. The use of audio-visual aids in the classroom can be made effective through conditioning. For example, if a word parrot is to be taught to the children in the class, then the picture of the parrot must be shown to them along with the word written on the blackboard. Children will speak that word after looking the picture, then the picture is removed and the children will repeat only the written word. Thus the children could learn to speak the parrot word as a result of conditioning. Okay. So helpful in adjustment and use of audio visual aids था ये. ठीक है, clear? आई होप ये आपको समझ में आ रहा हो और आप इजीली आराम से नोट्स बना सक रहे हो इससे. ठीक है, जो दूसरे यूनिवर्सिटी के लोग हैं वो ध्यान से एक बार चेक कर ले अपना सिलेबस, और सिलेबस के हिसाब से ही आप नोट्स यहाँ से तैयार कर सकते हो. ठीक है, सो द आवर 7th पॉइंट इज अराउजल ऑफ फियर, लव एंड जेलेसी. दिस इज आवर 7th एंड द लास्ट पॉइंट आई थिंक सो. इसके बाद हमारा ये एजुकेशन इम्प्लीकेशंस कंप्लीट हो जाएगा. द कंडीशनिंग हेल्प्स इन एक्सेलरेटिंग द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ फियर, लव एंड जेलेसी among the students in classroom. For instance, if a teacher beats any child excessively or he makes fun of him in the midst of his classmate, then quite naturally that child will show the fear or jealousy for the teacher even after hearing his name also. On the contrary, if a teacher exhibits love and affection for the students in return, the students will show the full regard for that टीचर. सो जैसा बोलते हैं ना, एवरी एक्शन हैज़ एन इक्वल एंड ऑपोजिट रिएक्शन, द सेम थिंग इज ये. जैसा टीचर रिएक्ट करेंगे वैसे ही बच्चे वापस रिएक्ट करेंगे उनका. ठीक है, सो टीचर्स के लिए पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड शो करना वो बहुत ज़रूरी है. नाउ आवर नेक्स्ट पॉइंट इज द ऑपरेंट कंडीशनिंग थ्योरी ऑफ स्किनर. B.F. Skinner proposed his theory and operant conditioning by conducting various experiments on animals. He used a special box known as the Skinner box for his experiment on rats. As the first step to this experiment, he placed a hungry rat inside the Skinner box. The rat was initially inactive inside the box, but gradually, as it began to adapt to the environment of the box, it began to explore around. Eventually, the rat discovered a lever upon pressing which food was released inside the box. After it felt its hunger, it started exploring the box again, and after a while, it pressed the lever for the second time as it grew hungry again. This phenomenon continued for the third, fourth, and the fifth time. and after a while the hungry rat immediately pressed the lever upon once it was placed in the box. Then the conditioning was deemed to be complete. Here, the action of pressing the lever is an operant response, a behavior, and the food released inside the chamber is the reward. The experiment is also known as the instrumental conditioning learning, as the response is instrumental in getting food. This experiment also deals with and explains the effects of positive reinforcement. Upon pressing the lever, the hungry rat was served with food which filled its hunger, hence it's a positive reinforcement. Okay, now our next point is the B.F. Skinner's second experiment. B.F. Skinner also conducted an experiment that explained negative reinforcement. First वाला positive था, second वाला negative reinforcement show कर रहा है. Skinner placed a rat in a chamber in the similar manner, but instead of keeping it hungry, he subjected the chamber to an unpleasant electric current. The rat, having experienced the discomfort, started to desperately move around the box and accidentally knocked the lever. Pressing of the lever immediately ceased the flow of unpleasant current. After a few times, the rat had smartened enough to go directly to the lever in order to prevent itself from the discomfort. The electric current reacted as the negative reinforcement, and the consequences of escaping the electric current made sure that the rat repeated the action again and again. Here too, the pressing of the lever is an operant response, and the complete stop of the electric current flow is its reward. Now comes to the conclusion. Both the experiment clearly explains the working of operant conditioning. The important part in an operant conditioning learning is to recognize the operant behavior and the consequences resulted in that particular environment. Okay, so here our operant conditioning theory completed. Now comes to the educational implications or significance of operant conditioning. So our first point is the successive approximation. The theory suggests the great potentiality of the shaping procedure for behavior modification. Operant conditioning can be used for shaping behavior of children by appropriate use of reinforcement or rewards. Behavior can be shaped through successive approximation in terms of small steps. Successive approximation is a process which means that completed behavior patterns are learned gradually through successive steps which are rewarding for the learner. Every successful step of the child must be rewarded by the teacher. Now come to the second point. Second point is eliminating negative behavior through extension. When a learned response is repeated without reinforcement, the strength of the tendency to perform that response undergoes a progressive decrease. Extension procedures can be successfully used by the classroom teacher in eliminating negative behavior of the students. So these are the first 2 points of the educational implications of operant conditioning. Okay, now comes to the third point. Our third point is the reinforcement. Operant conditioning has valuable implications for reinforcement techniques in the classroom. The schools can use the principle of operant conditioning to eliminate the element of fear from the school atmosphere by using the positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is perhaps the most widely used behavioral technique in the school setting. This technique simply involves the providing a reward for the positive behavior. The reward can be high grade, a pen, a smile, or a verbal compliment. The principle underlying positive reinforcement is that the tendency to repeat a response to a given stimulus will be strengthened as the response is positively rewarded. Now comes to the social learning theory of Bandura. What is a social learning theory? The social learning theory proposed by the Albert Bandura has become perhaps the most influential theory of learning and development. While rooted in many of the basic concepts of traditional learning theory, Bandura believed that direct reinforcement could not account for all the types of learning. His theory added a social element, arguing that people can learn new information and behavior by watching other people, known as observational learning or modeling, and this type of learning can be used to explain a wide variety of behavior. Okay, so this was the social learning theory of Bandura. What actually Bandura think? What is the social learning theory according to Bandura? And what Albert Bandura thinks of it? ठीक है? Okay, so next point is Bandura's theory claimed that children will identify and mirror the behavior of any other person. Bandura agreed with the behaviorist theory of classical conditioning and operant conditioning. ठीक है, ये उसका बिहेवियरिस्ट थ्योरी था और वो बिहेवियरिस्ट थ्योरी से अग्रीड था. क्लासिकल कंडीशनिंग और ऑपरेंट कंडीशनिंग जो भी हुआ है हमारा behaviorist theory से वो agreed थे. Now the next point is what is Albert Bandura's approach to psychology? When someone refers to Albert Bandura's approach to psychology, they are referring to the social learning theory. Bandura developed a theory that children learn by what they observe in social situations and executed a famous experiment called the Voodoo doll to attempt to prove his predictions. The social learning theory of Bandura focuses on the learning that occurs within a social context. It consists that people learn from one another, including the social concept as observational learning, imitations, and modeling. This learning theory emphasizes the importance of observing and modeling in the behavior. Now, next point is the basic social and learning concept. There are three core concepts at the heart of social learning theory. The idea that people can learn through observation, the idea that internal mental states are an essential part of this process, and this theory recognizes that just because something has been learned, it does not mean that it will result in a change. People learn through observing others' behavior, attitudes, and outcomes of those behaviors. Most human behavior is learned observationally through modeling. From observing others, one forms an idea of how new behavior are performed, and on later occasions, this coded information serves as a guide for action. And this was said by Bandura. Social learning theory explains human behavior in terms of continuous reciprocal interaction between cognitive, behavioral, and environmental influences. Summary: Bandura's social learning theory posits that people learn from one another via observation, imitation, and modeling. The theory has often been called a bridge between behaviorist and cognitive learning theories because it encompasses attention, memory, and motivation. So this was the summary. Banduras believed in the reciprocal determinism, that is, the world around a person's behavior cause each other, while behaviorism essentially states that one's environment causes one behavior. Bandura, who was studying adolescent aggression, found this too simplistic, and in addition, he suggested the behavior causes environment as well. ठीक है, so here we have completed the social learning theory of बंडूरा की जो भी social learning theory है वो हमारे यहाँ complete होता है. Next is the advanced organizer model. Advanced organizer model is given by the David Osobel, who is one of the educational psychologists. This theory of meaningful verbal learning deals with the three concerns. First is how knowledge is organized. Second, how the mind works to process new information. And third one is how teaching can apply these ideas about curriculum and learning when they present new material to students. This model is designed to strengthen students' cognitive structure. In this model, teacher plays the role of organizer of subject matter and presents the information through lecture, reading, and providing tasks to the learner to integrate what has been learned. In this approach, the teacher is responsible for the organizing and presenting what is to be learned. The learner's primary role is to master ideas and information. The advanced organizers provide concepts and principles to study principles to the students directly. ये डायरेक्टली ऑर्गेनाइज कर रहे हैं. देखो यहाँ पे ए बी में ही आपका सी पॉइंट भी है, थर्ड पॉइंट भी है. थर्ड पॉइंट ना बाय मिस्टेक मैं अलग से डालना भूल गई थी ये, और गलती से वहाँ पे ई लिखा गया. ठीक है, सो डू इट सी हाउ टीचर कैन अप्लाई दिस आइडियाज. ए बी एंड सी, 3 points. ओके, 3 theories. Now, according to Usubel, whether the material is meaningful or not depends more on the preparation of the learner and on the organization of the material than it does not method of the presentation. Next comes to the structure of the Usubel. Usubel maintains that a person's existing cognitive structure is the foremost factor governing whether new material will be meaningful and how well it can be acquired and retained. As per the views of Usubel, there is a parallel between the way subject matter is organized and the way people organize knowledge in their minds. In the present study, AOM is used as a tool to help students to attain the concept of English grammar with the comprehension of study material of secondary level, that is grade 9 students. Components of advanced organizer model. First comes to the syntax. ठीक है, these are the components of the advanced organizer model. और अभी आजकल ये जो organizer model है, advanced organizer model जिसे हम लोग AOM बोलते हैं, वो इंग्लिश ग्रामर की comprehension के study material में students को use होता है. Syntax. The advanced organizer model has three phases of activity. Phase 1 is the presentation of the advanced organizer, and phase 2 is the presentation of the learning task or learning material, and phase 3 is the strengthening of cognitive organization. Phase 3 tests the relationship of the learning material to existing ideas to bring about an active learning process. So इसमें आपके 3 phases होते हैं, phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3. Let us see what all these phases are. ठीक है, देखो एडवांस ऑर्गेनाइजर मॉडल जो है वो 3 फेजेस में डिवाइडेड है, फेज़ 1, फेज़ 2, फेज़ 3. फेज़ 1 जो होता है वो प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ एडवांस है, ठीक है, प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ एडवांस मॉडल. फेज़ 2 जो होता है वो प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ लर्निंग टास्क होता है, एंड जो फेज़ 3 होता है वो है हमारा स्ट्रेंथनिंग कॉग्निटिव ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. तो आपको अगर एडवांस ऑर्गेनाइजर मॉडल आएगा तो आप इससे बना करके एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हो. ठीक है, फेज़ 1 में आता है हमारा दैट इज़ प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ एडवांस ऑर्गेनाइजर, जिसमें है क्लैरिफाई एम्स ऑफ द लेसन, प्रेजेंट ऑर्गेनाइजर, आइडेंटिफाई डिफाइनिंग attributes, give examples, provide context, repeat, prompt awareness of learners' relevant knowledge and experience. Phase 2 है हमारा presentation of learning task material, present material, maintain attention, make organizer explicit and make logical order of learning material explicit. Phase 3 is the strengthening cognitive organization, जिसमें आता है use principle of integrative recognition, promote active reception learning, elicit critical approach the subject matter and clarify. ठीक है, नाउ फर्स्ट वॉज द सिंटेक्स, सेकेंड है हमारा सोशल सिस्टम. इन एडवांस ऑर्गेनाइजल मॉडल द टीचर रिटेन्स कंट्रोल ऑफ द इंटेलेक्चुअल स्ट्रक्चर टू रिलेट द लर्निंग मटेरियल टू द ऑर्गेनाइजर एंड टू हेल्प द स्टूडेंट्स डिफरेंशिएट न्यू मटेरियल फ्रॉम प्रीवियसली लीड्स टू द सक्सेसफुल एक्विजिशन ऑफ मटेरियल. Third point is the principle of reaction. Negotiation of meaning and responses between the teacher and the learner clarifies the meaning of the new learning material with existing knowledge of the students. Mutual interaction between the teacher and the learner responsibly connect organizer and learning material. Next point is the support system. The effectiveness of the advanced organizer depends on an integral and appropriate relationship between the conceptual organizer and the content. This model provides guidelines for the recognition structural materials. Next point is that is number E is the instructional and nurturant effects. The instrumental values of this model are the ideas themselves that are used as the organizer are learned as well as the information presented to the students. Clear? Okay. Now comes to the instructional and nurturant effect of AOM. So AOM means advanced organizer model, and here इसको 4 parts में हम लोग 4 phases में ये किए, that is the conceptual structure, meaningful assimilation of information and ideas, interest in inquiry and habits of precise thinking. ठीक है, इंस्ट्रक्शनल इफेक्ट और नर्चरल इफेक्ट है इसका AOM के, ये 4 इफेक्ट्स हैं. Conceptual structure, meaningful assimilation of information and ideas, interest in inquiry and habits of precise thinking. आप आराम से ये डायग्राम बना करके इसे एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हो कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, आपकी टीचर आपको मार्क्स देंगी, ठीक है। AOM मीन्स एडवांस ऑर्गेनाइजर मॉडल। नेक्स्ट कम्स टू द ड्रामेटिक रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ AOM। यहाँ पे AOM की जगह ना आपको लिखा गया है CAM। CAM stands for what? CAM means कंसेप्ट अटेनमेंट मॉडल। इसे भी 3 स्टेज में डिवाइड किया गया है, फर्स्ट स्टेज, सेकेंड स्टेज एंड थर्ड स्टेज। द फर्स्ट स्टेज इज द प्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजर, जिसके अंदर आता है आपका आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ एट्रीब्यूट्स, सिलेक्शन ऑफ स्ट्रक्चर्स, प्रोवाइडिंग ऑर्गेनाइजर्स एंड रिपीटिशन। नेक्स्ट इज द स्टेज 2, जिसमें आता है हमारा लिंकिंग लर्निंग मटेरियल टू ऑर्गेनाइजर्स, जिसमें आते हैं प्रेजेंटिंग ऑर्गेनाइजर्स एंड लॉजिकल ऑर्डर ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजर। एंड द लास्ट वन इज द स्टेज 3। स्टेज 3 में आता है हमारा इम्प्लीमेंटिंग कॉग्निटिव ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, ठीक है। इसके अंदर आता है हमारा एनालिसिस ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजर्स एंड एप्लीकेशन आइडियाज, ठीक है। तो ये था हमारा CAM, मतलब कंसेप्ट अटेनमेंट मॉडल। अब आते हैं हम डायग्राम 4 में। कंसेप्ट अटेनमेंट मॉडल एंड एडवांस ऑर्गेनाइजर मॉडल एज द मेंबर ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन प्रोसेसिंग फैमिली, दोनों को ही मेंबर बनाया गया इंफॉर्मेशन प्रोसेसिंग फैमिली के। तो इसके भी कुछ डायग्राम दिए गए हैं, लेट अस सी दैट डायग्राम। देखो, इंफॉर्मेशन प्रोसेसिंग मॉडल, ये जो है इसके अंदर आता है हमारा क्रिटिकल थिंकिंग, जो डिवाइड करता है इंडक्टिव स्ट्रैटेजीज, जो 2 तरह के, एक है हमारे ब्रूनर्स का और एक है हमारा ओसुबेल का। ब्रूनर्स में आता है हमारा कंसेप्ट अटेनमेंट मॉडल, जो इन्वॉल्व करता है कंपेयरिंग येस एंड नो विथ एग्जाम्पल्स, ठीक है। और ओसुबेल में आता है हमारा एडवांस ऑर्गेनाइजर मॉडल, जिसे हम AOM बोलते हैं, और ये इन्वॉल्व करता है क्लासिफाइंग डाटा इनटू स्ट्रक्चर्स, ठीक है। और ये दोनों ही बोथ कैन बी इंटीग्रेटेड, जो सबसे नीचे लास्ट में जो ब्राउन कलर से है ना, दैट इज रिटन कैन बी इंटीग्रेटेड, ठीक है। सो बोथ ब्रूनर्स और ओसुबेल्स दोनों के ही हम लोग इंटीग्रेट कर सकते हैं। एंड ब्रूनर्स के अंदर आ रहा है हमारा कंसेप्ट अटेनमेंट मॉडल, दैट इज CAM, एंड ओसुबेल के अंदर आ रहा है हमारा एडवांस ऑर्गेनाइजर मॉडल, दैट इज AOM, ठीक है। सो दिस वॉज द इंफॉर्मेशन प्रोसेसिंग मॉडल। नाउ कम्स टू द कंस्ट्रक्टिविस्ट थ्योरी। सो कंस्ट्रक्टिविस्ट थ्योरी जो है, इसके हमारा फर्स्ट पॉइंट है, दैट इज द रैडिकल कंस्ट्रक्टिविज्म ऑफ जीन पियागेट्स। जीन पियागेट्स के रैडिकल कंस्ट्रक्टिविज्म के बारे में हमें यहाँ पे पढ़ना है। इंट्रोडक्शन। The research of Swiss cognitive psychologist Jean Piaget has contributed immeasurably to our understanding of the development of learning in children. Piaget suggested many comprehensive development theory. However, this chapter will discuss 4 of the Piaget's key concepts are applicable to learning at any stage: assimilation, accommodation, equilibrium and schemas. ये 4 के बारे में हम लोग यहाँ पढ़ने वाले हैं। इसके 2 मेजर प्रिंसिपल्स भी है, लेट अस सी। अकॉर्डिंग टू पियागेट्स, 2 मेजर प्रिंसिपल्स गाइड इंटेलेक्चुअल ग्रोथ एंड बायोलॉजिकल डेवलपमेंट, adaptation and organization. For individuals to survive in an environment, they must adapt to physical and mental stimuli. Assimilation and accommodation are both the part of the adaptation process. Piaget's believe that human being possesses mental structures that assimilate external events and convert them to fit their mental structures. Moreover, mental structures accommodate themselves to new, unusual, and constantly changing aspects of the external environment. Piaget's second principle, organization, refers to the nature of these adaptive mental structures. He suggests that the mind is organized in complex and integrated ways. The simplest level is the schema, a mental representation of some physical or mental action that can be performed on an object, event, or phenomena. We now turn to a discussion of these concepts. जैसा कि हमने देखा है कि उसके 4 मेजर कॉन्सेप्ट्स होते हैं, स्टेजेस होते हैं, एजेस होते हैं, तो वो अब हम देखने वाले। फर्स्ट इज द एसिमिलेशन। Assimilation occurs when a child perceives new objects or events in terms of existing schemas or operations. Piaget emphasized the functional quality or assimilation, where children and adults tend to apply any mental structure that is available to assimilate a new event and actively seek to use this newly acquired mental structure. Okay, this was the assimilation, assimilate karna. Next is the accommodation. Accommodation refers to the process of changing internal mental structure to provide consistency with external reality. It occurs when existing schemas or operations must be modified or new schemas are created to account for a new experience. Obviously, accommodation influences assimilation and vice versa. As reality is assimilated, structures are accommodated. ठीक है, तो assimilated अगर reality को हम लोग assimilate करते हैं तो structures जो होता है वो accommodate होता है. Clear? Next point is the equilibration. Piagets believe that the cognitive development in children is contingent on four factors: biological maturation, experience with the physical environment, experience with the social environment, and equilibration. Equilibration refers to the biological drive to produce an optimal state of equilibrium between people's cognitive structures and their environment. Equilibration is an attempt to bring about a state of equilibrium between the first three factors and the reality associated with the one's external environment. This state must be present for and the reality associated with the one's external environment. This state must be present for cognitive development to take place. Equilibration involves both assimilation and accommodation. During each stage of development, people conduct themselves with certain logical internal mental structures that allow them to adequately make sense of the world when external reality does not match with the logical internal mental structures. Equilibration occurs as an effort to bring balance between assimilation and accommodation as the person adapts more sophisticated internal mental structures. Human beings continually attempt to make sense of the world around them by assimilating new information into pre-existing mental schemas and accommodating thought processes as necessary. This effort to maintain a balance, denoted by the equilibration, allows for cognitive development and effective thought process. ठीक है, तो 3 points हमने देख लिया, that is the assimilation, accommodation and equilibration. And now the last, that is the fourth point, is the schemata. Piagets between a schema as the mental representation of an associated sets of perception, ideas, and actions. Piaget considers schemata to be the basic building block of thinking. A schema can be discrete and specific or sequential and elaborate. For example, a schema may be as specific as recognizing a dog or as elaborate as categorizing different types of dog. As cognitive development proceeds, new schemata are developed, and existing schemata are more efficiently organized to better adapt to the environment. Cognitive development becomes evident through changes in behavior as this adaptation takes place. The process of assimilation involves attempts to organize existing schemata for better understanding events in the external world, whereas accommodation involves changing pre-existing schemata to adapt to a new situation. न्यू सिचुएशन को अडाप्ट करने के लिए हम लोग कैसे प्री एग्जिस्टिंग स्कीमाटा को चेंज करते हैं. हमने स्टार्टिंग में मैंने आपको बताया था कि 4 पार्ट है इसके जो हमें पढ़ना है: assimilation, accommodation, equilibration and schemata. So all these 4 were there. Now the last is the conclusion of the Jean Piaget's means the radial constructivism theory का conclusion part. ठीक है, let us see the conclusion. Cognitive development is a complex process comprising 3 principal concepts affecting the development process, that is the assimilation, accommodation and equilibration. All 3 are associated with the formation of schemata and their modification in order to attain a balanced sense of understanding of the external world. सो दिस वॉज द कंक्लूजन। यहाँ पे हमारा कंस्ट्रक्टिविस्ट थ्योरी कंप्लीट होता है। आप सबके स्क्रीनशॉट लेकर के आप आराम से बना सकते हो, आप देख सकते हो कि कहाँ क्या दिया गया है। Comes to the social constructivism, that is the Vygotsky theory. Lev Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist whose socio-cultural theory emphasizes the importance of culture and interaction in the development of cognitive abilities. Vygotsky differed with Piaget in that he believed that a person has not only a set of abilities but also a set of potential abilities that can be realized if given the proper guidance from others. Vygotsky developed theories on teaching that have been adopted by educators today. Like Piaget, Vygotsky acknowledged intrinsic development, but he argued that it is the language, writing, and concept arising from the culture that elect the highest level of cognitive thinking. He believed that social interaction with teachers and more learned peers could facilitate a learner's potential for learning. Without this interpersonal instructions, he believed learners' mind would not advance very far as their knowledge would be based only on their own discoveries. So this was the Vygotsky theory. Now comes to the zone of proximal development of scaffolding. Vygotsky's best known concept is the zone of proximal development, that is ZPD. The ZPD has been defined as the distance between the actual development level as determined by the independent problem solving and the level of potential development as determined through the problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers. Vygotsky stated that the learners should be taught in the ZPD, a good teacher or more knowledgeable other. MKO. MKO stands for more knowledgeable others. Identifies a learner's ZPD and helps them stretch beyond it. Then the MKO gradually withdraws support until the learner can perform the task unaided. Other psychologists have applied the metaphor of scaffold, the temporary platform on which construction workers stand, to Vygotsky theory. Scaffolding is the temporary support that a MKO gives a learner to do a task. Okay, so this was a ZPD. Model of Vygotsky zone of proximal development, that is ZPD. So this is the model of ZPD and scaffolding. ठीक है, knowledgeable others, technology and tools, what I can learn on my own, what I can learn with the help of ZPD and beyond my reach. This is the model of Vygotsky zone of proximal development. Now comes to the thought and speech. Do you ever talk to yourself? Why? Chances are this occurs when we are struggling with a problem, trying to remember something, or feel very emotional about a situation. Children talk to themselves too. Piaget interpreted this as egocentric speech or a practice engaged in the course of a child's inability to see things from another's point of view. Vygotsky, however, believed that children talk to themselves in order to solve problems or clarify thoughts. As children learn to think in words, they do so aloud. Referred to as the private speech, speech meant only for oneself. Eventually, thinking out loud becomes thought accompanied by internal speech, and talking to oneself becomes a practice only engaged in when we are trying to learn something or remember something. This inner is not as elaborate as the speech we use when communicating with others. So, this was also said by the Vygotsky, and this was a thought and speech given by the Vygotsky. Okay, now comes to the implications for education. Vygotsky theory have been extremely influential for education. Although Vygotsky himself never mentioned the term scaffolding, it is often credited to him as a continuous of his ideas pertaining to the ways adults or other children can use guidance in order for a child to work within their ZPD. Educators often apply this concept by assigning tasks that students cannot do on their own, but which they can do with assistance. They should provide just enough assistance so that students learn to complete the task independently, and then provide an environment that enables students to do harder tasks than would otherwise be possible. Teachers can also allow students with more knowledge to assist students who need more guidance. Especially in the context of collaborative learning, group members who have higher level of understanding can help the less advanced members learn within their zone of proximal development. So this was the last point of this unit. ठीक है, पेपर 3 के यूनिट 2 दैट इज थियोरेटिकल पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ लर्निंग, इसका ये लास्ट पॉइंट था. ठीक है, हियर वी हैव कंप्लीटेड दिस यूनिट and after this I'll be giving you the unit 3 in the next video. Okay, so if this video is helpful for you, अगर ये वीडियो आपके लिए थोड़ा भी हेल्पफुल है then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Okay, I hope ये वीडियो आपके लिए हेल्पफुल हो because ये स्पेशली कोल्हान यूनिवर्सिटी के तो ये सारे ही टॉपिक्स कवर अप कर रहे हैं. कुछ टॉपिक्स है जो दूसरे यूनिवर्सिटी के हैं, उनके कुछ टॉपिक्स ही यहाँ वहाँ होंगे, अदरवाइज मैक्सिमम टॉपिक्स कवर अप हुए होंगे बिकॉज बीएड में हम सब कोई भी स्टेट के क्यों ना हो, वो सारे के सारे कोई भी यूनिवर्सिटी के क्यों ना हो, सारे के सारे एक ही चीज़ पढ़ाते हैं, एक ही टॉपिक ही कवर अप करते हैं. कुछ थोड़ा बहुत यहाँ वहाँ होगा सिलेबस में, अदरवाइज मैक्सिमम पॉइंट तो आपको यहाँ मिल ही जाएगा. ठीक है, सो प्लीज़ लाइक दिस वीडियो एंड सब्सक्राइब माई चैनल. Thank you for watching. We'll meet you in the next video again.